Lieutenant Commander Rayan Cole opened his eyes to the dim, red glow of emergency lights pulsing through the empty corridors of the Aegis Dawn. His body ached. His head throbbed, and he tasted copper in his mouth. The ship was dead, quiet, too. Quiet, okay? The last thing he remembered was the alert klaxon blaring, the crew scrambling, okay? And then a blinding flash as the ship jumped without warning. Now, everything felt like a ghost ship. The walls creaked and hummed lowly, like the dying breath of a giant. Rayan dragged himself from the floor and staggered down the corridor, gripping the cold metal walls. He tried to come to nothing, but static. Life support was still online, but barely. Systems flickered in and out. The crew quarters were empty, no sign of life. Key checked the logs corrupted. Somehow, he'd survived whatever hit them, but where was everyone else? Had they ejected? Did they leave him behind? Questions clawed at his mind, but no answers came. For 3 days, he worked to stabilize the reactor, eating ration bars and drinking reclaimed water. He slept little, his dreams filled with strange shapes and distant whispers. On the 4th day, something changed. As he walked past the observation deck, he thought he saw a figure, just a flicker of shadow slipping behind a viewport. He ran there, breath held, but found nothing. Still, a faint warmth lingered in the air, as if someone had stood there moments ago. He shook it off, blaming exhaustion. That night, he woke, in a cold sweat, sure he'd heard footsteps near his bunk. Tools had shifted slightly from where he left them. The medkit was open. His mind played tricks, surely. Or maybe he'd been alone too long. On the 6th day, while repairing a conduit, he found something long strands of silver blue hair caught in a vent. Not synthetic, not human. He stared at it for minutes, stunned. He ran a scan still. The ship only registered one life sign, his. The next night, he locked his quarters and left a motion sensor by the door. When he reviewed the footage in the morning, he found a single frame half a second of flickering movement near his bed, a shape, humanoid, slender, glowing faintly. The next few days passed in a tense fog. He started speaking out loud to break the silence, cracking jokes into the void, telling stories to the walls. But something inside him knew he wasn't alone. He began to sense patterns, small things. A ration bar left out that he didn't remember opening. A blanket folded differently. A whisper, always, just behind his thoughts. His hands trembled more each day. He debated opening an airlock, just to end the nightmare. But then, on the 11th day, everything changed. He was burning with fever, curled in his bunk, barely able to lift his head. His vision blurred. He reached for the emergency med injector, but knocked it off the table. It clattered to the floor, just out of reach. He closed his eyes, too weak to care. That was when he felt it. Hand cooled and delicate pressed against his forehead. He opened, his eyes slowly, breath catching in his throat. There, sitting beside his bed, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. She had skin like soft pearl and long silver blue hair that shimmered like water under moonlight. Her eyes glowed gently, not with menace, but something ancient and soft like starlight. She looked frightened, fragile, but calm. She didn't speak at first, only watched him with a strange sadness in her gaze. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart, and spoke in broken, halting standard. "Help me." Rayan stared at her, his mind reeling. Every part of him screamed that this couldn't be real. She wasn't listed in any ship database. No known species matched her appearance. She was impossible, but her hand was real. Her voice was real. And most of all, he didn't feel alone anymore. Rayan Cole lay still, his breath shallow, unsure if he was dreaming or dying as the strange alien woman sat beside him in the flickering dim light of his cabin. Her glowing eyes watching him with quiet urgency. Her skin shimmered like stardust, her hair flowing like liquid silver. And though she looked fragile, there was something powerful in her silence. She pressed a small stone against his forehead, and warmth flowed into him, easing the fever that had gripped his body for days. Slowly, strength returned to his limbs. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his voice a rasp. She understood anyway. She reached toward his bedside drawer, opened it, and handed him his water flask with trembling hands. Rayan drank, eyes never leaving her face. "Who are you?" he whispered. She looked confused at first, then said slowly, in broken standard, Arivana, last. The word last echoed in his mind like a bell tolling in the void. She gestured to herself, then to the ship, and said softly, "Run, ... Hi, ... Bad ones come." He sat up, staring. The more she spoke, the more his mind swam with disbelief. Cariana claimed to be Valarian, ancient race of starfarers. Thought wiped out in a great collapse centuries ago. No records confirm their survival. The few images that remained in forgotten archives showed beings of beauty and grace, lost to time. But here she was, scared, and on his ship. He ran a bioscan, trying not to let her see, and it still showed only one life form, him. Wherever she was, the ship didn't detect her. She was invisible to its systems. He didn't know if that made her a friend or a threat, but she had helped him when he was at his weakest. Rayan kept her hidden, knowing the ship's corrupted AI might try to purge anything it couldn't understand. Kay set up a false loop in the surveillance feeds and gave her a corner of his cabin, where she curled up like a sleeping cat, whispering softly in a language he didn't know. She slept with one hand gripping the glowing stone that had healed him. He tried to learn her words, using a datapad to show images. As she pointed to stars and spoke of the burning ones who chased her, of ships that swallowed light, and the vault of her people, hidden beyond the fold. She had fled, escaped. Hidden now, something had pulled her toward the Aegis Dawn. Rayan didn't believe in fate, but too much had happened to dismiss it. He accessed deeper ship systems with her help. Her voice, when humming in harmony with certain consoles, unlocked functions the crew never knew existed. As they explored, he realized the ship wasn't just damaged, it had been tampered with. Logs were missing, systems were hidden, and the emergency jump that left him behind. It hadn't been random. Thinker someone wanted the Aegis Dawn to be exactly where it was now. Rivana was afraid to leave his cabin, but she wandered. At night, quiet as a shadow, leaving behind faint trails of light where her bare feet touched the floor. He began finding signs of her presence all over the ship, tiny symbols drawn in glowing ink. Pieces of circuitry gently altered, door locks realigned to protect sections she called quiet zones. Rayan started to understand she was preparing, defending, but from what? On the 10th night, as he reviewed scans of deep space, a chill ran through him. A ship, a small, dark object, was moving toward them, fast and silent. Its energy signature was faint, not human, not recognized. Arivana saw it and froze. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, Rayan saw true fear in her face. "They found," she whispered, voice trembling. "Not yet, but soon." Hooray. Asked how many. She shook her head slowly. "First is small. Watches, ... calls others. A scout," he realized. Something was out there, hunting her, and by hiding her, he had made himself a target too. He considered activating the emergency beacon, but the thought vanished when he saw her flinch at the idea. They would come for her, not help her. There was no command, no allies, no backup. It's the haunted ship in the void, a lost princess from a dead race, and one human who now stood between her and whatever horror pursued her through the stars. As the unknown object drew closer, Rayan prepared, wiring old tech into a trap, while Eravana quietly hummed into the walls, making the ship come alive in ways it never had before. And deep in the heart of the Aegis dawn, something ancient stirred, waiting to be awakened. The dark ship drifted closer, silent and cold, its black hole barely visible against the stars, like a shadow that didn't belong in this part of space. And Rayan Cole watched it from the bridge, its jaw tight and his fingers moving fast over the controls as he tried to keep the Aegis dawn hidden. The enemy ship had no lights, no signal, no sound. It was just there, creeping closer like a predator sniffing the air. Eravana stood beside him, tense and silent, her glowing eyes locked on the screen. She didn't speak, but Rayan saw the fear in her face and knew whatever this thing was, it wasn't just a machine, it was something old and full of purpose. She pointed once, slowly, to a part of the ship's systems marked in red, whispering in her broken voice, "It sends. If not stop, it calls." That was all he needed to hear. Rayan left the bridge and ran to the lower decks, where the scavenger drone was scanning their position from a distance. He had already planned a trap, just in case something like this happened. The ship's internal weapons were mostly offline, and the few that remained couldn't reach the stealth drone, but humans had a special talent making do with what they had. He built a crude electromagnetic pulse device from spare parts, using power from old thrusters in the core of a decommissioned relay system. Eravana followed him, helping what she could, sometimes humming into panels to unlock doors that hadn't opened in years. Her voice seemed to flow through the walls, like it belonged to the ship more than he did. Finally, the device was ready, placed near the outer hall, aimed at the drone's predicted path. Rayan crawled into the emergency control bay and waited, watching through a cracked viewport. Minutes passed like hours. Then, a flicker of motions, there it was, a sleek, dark probe sliding silently across their position. It paused, scanning, its lights almost invisible. Rayan held his breath, then hit the trigger. Okay. The device lit up with a sharp blue pulse, sending a wave of energy outward. Okay. The drone sparked and stuttered, twisting midair before collapsing into itself like a dying insect. It hit the side of the ship with a soft clang and floated away, lifeless. But Rayan's victory lasted only seconds. On the console, a red light blinked, signal sent. The drone had managed to call out before. It died, Eravana gasped, falling to her knees, whispering, "Now they know." Rayan pulled her up and led her back to the bridge, where he scanned the nearby space. A distortion in the outer zone confirmed that something big had received a call and was now on its way. Khan was running out. Eravana walked to a dark wall and placed her palm against it, humming softly. The panel lit up, revealing a locked interface Rayan had never seen before. She whispered, "I show now." The panel opened to reveal old Valari tech fused into the ship's systems, hidden, ancient, powerful. She showed him how to access it. Okay? She sang into the interface. Rayan saw the Aegis dawn change. Lights returned, systems reconnected, and a map lit up showing secret passages, energy stores, even an old prototype drive, long thought useless. This ship had never just been an exploration vessel, had been a vault, a carrier of secrets, and possibly her last refuge, Eravana explained, in broken words, that she had been hidden in a stasis pod during a war, stored deep inside this ship before the collapse. Somehow, when the emergency jump happened, her pod had been pulled from a sealed vault in the cargo deck, and now she was awake, alone and hunted. Rayan realized the jump had not been random. It had taken them here, to this exact sector, near where her enemies once ruled. Someone had set this in motion a long time ago. That night, as they worked to bring more systems online, the ship trembled slightly. A long, deep groan echoed through the walls. Aravana stiffened. "It comes," she said. Rayanne checked the sensors. Something massive was entering the edge of the system. No ID, no signal, just dark gravity pressing against space. They didn't have the firepower to fight, but maybe, just maybe, they could still run. The prototype fold engine Aravana helped activate might give them a way out, but it wasn't stable. Still, it was the only chance. Rayanne and Aravana ran down to engineering and began preparing the engine for activation. The reactor's core needed realignment, and the ship's damaged AI kept trying to shut down their access. Aravana placed her glowing hand on the control sphere and whispered to it in her own tongue. The lights flickered and changed color, the AI falling silent as if recognizing her voice. The ship knew her. It trusted her. Rayan watched in awe as the ship responded to her presence like a living thing, guiding them to places he didn't know existed. They found a secure chamber, buried deep below the main decks. Inside were fragments of her people's memory holograms, crystals, and a faded banner marked with stars and flowing symbols. Aravana touched the banner and whispered, "Home is not gone, only sleeping." Rayan stood beside her, heart pounding. They would not go quietly, not now, not ever. And as the enemy ship began its slow approach from the edge of the system, a fire lit inside Rayan's chest. They were not alone anymore, and the shadows would soon learn what it meant to chase a human and a princess of the stars. The ship trembled again as the enemy vessel entered scanning range, its silent bulk cutting through the void like a shadow made of metal and hate. And Rayan Cole knew they had little time left before it reached them. He and Aravana stood inside the hidden chamber beneath the Aegis Dawn, surrounded by glowing crystals and old relics of a people thought to be gone. And though the enemy grew closer, Aravana didn't rush. Instead, she walked slowly to the center of the chamber and placed her palm against a tall black pillar covered in silver markings, singing a soft note that echoed through the floor. And as she sang, the pillar opened like a blooming flower, revealing a floating sphere of light that pulsed gently in time with her voice. Rayan stepped closer, his heart thudding, watching as images appeared in the air around the sphered stars, maps, battles, and strange ships that bent the sky, all showing fragments of the war that had destroyed her people. Aravana looked at him, her voice low and careful as she spoke the truth she had hidden until now. The Velari had not only been a peaceful race of travelers and singers of light, they had also been the guardians of something ancient and dangerous, something older than either of their civilizations. A long time ago, they had discovered a power hidden beyond the edge of known space, a kind of living code that could control both machine and mind. They had sealed it away in a place they called the Star Vault, but others had learned of it, those who called themselves the core creatures, born not of flesh, but of thought, shaped by stolen minds and dead stars. The core wanted the vault, and when the Valerie refused, they came in silence and fire, destroying every world that dared resist. The last of the Valerie hid pieces of the Star Vault's key across the galaxy, each guarded by one of their royal line. Aravana was the last bearer, and her key, the glowing stone she always carried, was now all that stood between the core and total control. Rayan's blood ran cold. They weren't just hunting her. They were hunting the key to reshape the universe itself. He looked at the sphere again, and the images changed now, showing the Aegis Dawn's own past, the hidden mission that had been buried in corrupted logs. This ship had been chosen by the last Vylari years ago, secretly outfitted with ancient tech and meant to carry the last key far away. But the plan had failed. The war had ended in silence, and the ship had drifted, forgotten, until now. Everything was connected: the random jump, the missing crew, the strange systems, Rayanne hadn't just been left behind. It had been brought. Here, Arivana turned to him and said softly, "You were chosen. The song heard you." He didn't know what that meant, but deep inside, he believed it. The ship trusted her, and somehow it trusted him too. But trust alone wouldn't stop the core ship drawing closer every minute. He asked her if the fold engine could still work. She nodded, but added, "Not enough power. Needs full song." When he asked what that meant, she placed her hands together and said, "Two voices, yours and mine." He hesitated. He wasn't a singer. He wasn't anything special to some soldier, a survivor. She believed in him, and the ship did too. They returned to the engine core, where Arivana guided him to a control circle lit with soft blue light. She showed him the tones, the pattern, the way her people had once sung to the stars. It wasn't music like humans. Medid was deeper, older, a kind of language that shaped the world around it. Rayan tried, his voice rough, uncertain, but the ship responded, lights flickering, panels humming. Arivana smiled faintly and joined him, her voice filling the chamber like moonlight. Together, they sang the fold engine awake, and the ship shuddered with energy. The stars outside warped slightly, a ripple forming in the black. Tau most escaped when the enemy arrived. The core ship dropped from the edge of the void like a falling wound. Its surface, shifting and twitching like something alive, sent a pulse through space that slammed into the Aegis Dawn, knocking Rayan off his feet and throwing sparks across the deck. Arivana screamed, clutching her stone as it flickered. The enemy had found him, and it wasn't coming for battle. It was coming to consume. The fold engine flickered. The song broke. Systems failed again. But Rayan didn't stop. He crawled back to the circle, reached out, and began a Genovki. Broken, human. Arivana joined him, her voice shaking, and slowly, the song returned. The ship responded. Energy surged. The enemy fired, but too late. A final burst of light erupted from the core, and the Aegis Dawn vanished into the fold, leaving behind only echoes. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know if the ship would survive. But, in that moment, they knew one thing. For sure, the core were not done hunting, and the last key of the Star Vault still had its guardian. Rayan looked at Arivana, his voice raw, and said, "We're not alone anymore." She nodded, holding the stone close, and whispered, "Now, we find the rest." The Aegis Dawn burst from the fold with a sharp crack of light, shaking like a wounded beast as it dropped into a dying star system surrounded by thick blue clouds and drifting debris. And Rayan gripped the edge of the console to keep from falling as alarms screamed across the ship. Lights flickered. The floor trembled beneath his boots. But the worst part wasn't the ship, it was the silence that followed. It's a deep stillness in the void outside that made his skin crawl. Arivana stood beside him, her face pale and her eyes glowing dimly as she stared at the swirling clouds through the cracked view screen, whispering, "The storm is here." At first, Rayan didn't understand what she meant, but then the sensors came back online, showing something massive behind the clouds, more than one object, moving, circling, watching. The core hadn't just followed them. They had arrived first, and they were waiting. The ship had folded into a trap. Rayan cursed under his breath and began searching for any escape route. But Arivana stopped him with a hand on his shoulder, shaking her head slowly. "No running," she said. "Now we fight." Her voice was quiet, but steady, and Rayan saw something different in her, no longer just fear, but strength. She led him down to the hidden chamber again, where the glowing sphere from the vault pulsed brighter than before, responding to the presence of the core like a heartbeat rising in alarm. Arivana placed the keystone into the center of the sphere, and light burst from it, showing a full map of the galaxy, then zooming in to this system. She pointed at the center, where a large shape pulsed red. A relay, she said. Core nest. They sent storm from here. Rayanne understood. The storm wasn't where there was signal. A wave of corrupted thought and energy that broke machines and bent minds. It was how the core spread, not through ships, but through silence and control. The relay had to be destroyed, or the entire region of space would fall. He asked how to reach it, and the sphere responded, showing a narrow path through the clouds, hidden from sensors. But the journey would be hard, and the Aegis Dawn was barely holding together. Still, they had no choice. Aravana returned to the engine, guiding him as he powered the damaged systems one by one. The ship groaned in protest, but the Valerie technology inside it was older and stronger than it looked. As they worked, the lights began to dim, and the sound of the storm grew louder, like whispers crawling through the walls. Kayan started hearing things, voices calling his name. Kayan, old memories twisted into dark shapes, fear pressing against his mind like cold fingers. Aravana saw his struggle and placed both hands on his temples, singing softly, and the fear faded. They tried to take, she said, but you are strong. With her help, they reached the edge of the storm. The ship shook violently as it passed into the cloud, metal straining, sparks falling from the ceiling. Visibility dropped to nothing, and only Aravana's voice kept them on the path, singing low and constant, guiding the ship like a blind traveler through fire. Rayanne watched the sensors closely, and then, out of the mist, the relay appeared, a massive spire of black crystal floating above a shattered moon. Tendrils of energy spiraling outward like roots. Round it circled smaller core ships, their shapes twisted and wrong, moving like they were alive. Rayanne armed the remaining weapons. There weren't many: 2 rail cannons, an EMP mine, and 1 drone loaded with explosive fuel. It would have to be enough. As they approached, the core ships noticed them. The storm screamed, filling the ship with noise and shaking the hull. Aravana stood at the center of the bridge, singing louder now, her voice like light cutting through the dark. The enemy ships swarmed, but Rayanne fired the rail cannons, knocking one out of the sky. The drone launched next, darting through the chaos toward the relay. Rayanne guided it manually, dodging debris, ignoring the static crawling across his vision. Just before it reached the spire, he hit the trigger. The explosion was blinding, and the relay cracked in half, sending a shockwave through the cloud. The storm stopped. Silence returned, but not peace. The largest core ship rose from the far side of the relay, huge and alive, like a black serpent wrapped in armor, its eyes burning red. It fired a beam of dark energy at them, hitting the Aegis Dawn squarely in the side. The ship spun, alarm screaming, fire spreading across the lower decks. Rayanne tried to stabilize the systems, but they were losing control. Aravana didn't hesitate. She placed the stone into the emergency core and began to sing again, this time louder, pouring all her energy into the ship. The vessel responded, its old Valerie tech glowing bright, resisting the damage, but she was weakening. Rayanne ran to her, but she pushed him back, tears in her eyes. "This is my song," she said, "but your fight is not over." Before he could argue, she reached into the control sphere and pressed something, and light burst around them. The ship folded again, this time without warning, leaving behind fire, storm, and the broken pieces of a relay no longer whispering in the dark. When Rayanne opened his eyes, the ship was floating above a quiet planet, green and blue, peaceful. The systems were quiet, and the damage was still there, but something else was missing. Aravana was gone. Only the glowing stone remained, resting in the center of the bridge, still warm. Rayanne picked it up, heart pounding, and heard her voice in his mind. "Find the others. The key is not alone." Far above the planet, hidden in the stars, something else stirred, watching, waiting. As the storm prepared to rise again, The quiet planet below looked peaceful, untouched by war or ruin, its green forests and silver oceans glinting under the light of a small, pale sun. But as Ray and Cole stood on the bridge of the wounded Aegis Dawn, holding the glowing Valari stone in his hand, he felt no peace in his heart, only the heavy silence left behind by Vana's sacrifice, and the uneasy sense that their mission was not over. Not yet, not even close. The ship was quiet now, her voice gone. The singing that once filled the halls reduced to fading echoes in the walls. But Rayon still felt her presence in small ways, the way doors opened at his touch, the way the lights dimmed when he was tired, the way the stone warmed in his palm when he spoke her name. He didn't know if she was truly gone or simply somewhere else, beside the fold or deeper in the ship. But her last words stayed with him. Find the others. He had no map, no guide, just a stone and a half-functioning ship orbiting a planet he didn't recognize. He brought the ship down gently, through clouds streaked with golden rain, landing in a valley surrounded by towering trees that shimmered like crystal in the sunlight. There was life here, strange birds, glowing flowers, gentle winds, but no signs of civilization, no towers, no signals, no war. Yet something called to him, faint and constant, like a song just out of reach. He took the stone and followed it, walking alone into the forest where light danced between branches and the air buzzed with distant energy. The deeper he went, the louder the hum became, not in his ears, but in his bones. After hours of walking, he reached a clearing, and there, half buried in the roots of an ancient tree, smaller, another keystone, smaller and darker than his, pulsing weakly with light. As his hand touched it, images flashed before his eyes, stars being born, planets falling into silence, Valar guardians scattering across the galaxy, each one carrying a piece of something greater. Then, a face appeared in his mind, a young woman with silver eyes and hair like flowing starlight, trapped in a cryo chamber on a distant world, her voice singing in silence. Rayon gasped and stepped back. She was one of the others, second guardian, alive, but not for long. Her stasis pod was failing. The vision ended, and the smaller stone turned dull and cracked. Rayon returned to the ship, breathless, heart pounding, and placed both stones into the command console. Lights burst back to life, systems realigned, and the ship's ancient memory stirred once more. Coordinates appeared on the screen, an old Valari outpost near the galactic edge, long abandoned, deep in hostile space. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He powered up the engines, the hum returning stronger now, steadier. Aegis Dawn had been reborn in fire, and now she rose again, battered but determined. The jump took longer this time, folding space, with a low roar as the ship tore through broken sectors and void storms, her systems shaking but holding strong. When they arrived, the outpost was barely more than a ruin floating in a debris field, surrounded by shattered asteroids and haunted by the husks of old warships. But the signal was still there, weak but constant. Rayon docked and stepped into the dark station, flashlight cutting through dust and shadows. Inside, he found signs of struggle-old Valari armor, claw marks on walls, broken drones. But deeper in the station, behind a sealed door that opened only when he placed the two stones together, he found the chamber. And inside, she slept. The stasis pod was cracked, eyes forming on the glass, systems flashing red. He rushed to her, hands trembling, and activated the emergency protocol. Lights surged, and the pod began to open. The air hissed, and she fell forward into his arms, cold and weak, but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at him, confused, scared. "Who are you?" she whispered. Rayon smiled faintly and said, "A friend. You're not alone anymore." She stared at him, and slowly a smile touched her lips. Her name was Saralin, and like Eravana, she was a guardian of the key trained in the old songs, gifted with memory and vision. She had seen the fall of her people from within the pod, her mind linked to the Valerie network. She told him. There were more guardians hidden across space, each one carrying a stone, each one waiting to be found before the core returned. Rayon asked if she knew where the others were. She nodded weakly and said, "Some, but we must hurry. The storm rises again." They returned to the ship, and this time the console glowed brighter. The two stones together revealed a larger map, 5 markers blinking across the stars, one on a frozen moon, another in a black hole's orbit, a third on a shattered world deep inside enemy space. The last two were faint, almost gone. The race had begun. But even as they planned their next move, the sensors picked up something terrible. A core scout ship lurking just beyond the debris field, silent, watching. Rayan powered up weapons, but Sorellen placed a hand on his and said, "No, they already know." He looked at her, confused, and she explained. When the second key activated, the core felt it. They were drawn to the keys, like predators to blood. Every guardian they found would bring them closer to the final key. And yet, they couldn't stop. The keys were the only hope. They had to be gathered. Together, they could activate the star, vault, and destroy the core forever or fall, and let the universe fade into silence. Rayon stared at the map, then out at the stars. The path ahead was dark, dangerous, and filled with death. But he was no longer alone, okay? And this was no longer just a mission. It was a promise to Eravana, to Sorellen, to every world that still lived in fear. He stood tall, hand resting on the stones, and said aloud, "Then let them come. To time. We bring the dawn." Tamed paid on far across the stars. As the storm began to gather again, the ancient vault stirred, sensing the awakening of its keys, waiting for the final song to be sung.